Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
So, Dean, I don't think healthcare, the need for healthcare is probably not going to go away anytime soon.
I don't think so. No, we need healthcare.
Seems like people are still getting older.
Yes, sick.
Things are still happening to them.
Yes.
I mean, we were just
Injuries
talking
happen.
yesterday about all of my maladies. You know, I've had like multiple doctor visits in the last couple months.
You're just doing your part to keep the healthcare system sustained.
Stopped into the ER once. I've done urgent care. I've had various medicines.
Moly.
I mean, you'd think I was falling apart. In some ways,
yeah.
I probably am, but I mean, it hasn't been that bad. But
Welcome to old age. Yeah.
Yeah, just, healthcare is a thing.
It is a thing. It's not going anywhere, bro.
It's not going anywhere.
Nope.
We got an aging population. We all need it.
Yeah.
And you might have noticed healthcare changed a little bit over the last few years.
Yes, for sure.
There was something going on in the world. I can't quite remember what it was.
Over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's kind of
related?
fading away. I don't know. We don't seem to talk about it that much anymore.
Yeah. In fact, we prefer not to talk about it. Yes.
Exactly. Well, obviously, we saw some innovation during the pandemic.
True.
But as we've moved kind of away from that and kind of out of that phase, we were kind of curious, well, where do we stand now? What's going on with healthcare now, in particular, obviously, for our channel?
Are there still
technology.
opportunities, I wonder?
Exactly. What's the status of digital health? What's next? We got Katharine Cummings from ELO joining us again today on the show to help us dive into this. We're going to talk about some healthcare tech predictions, some trends, some opportunities. We're going to see what she's seeing, on her end as she's out there talking with customers and dealing
like literally
with the
today,
space.
she was out talking to customers, right?
Exactly.
Hot off the press.
Exactly. So we're going to find out what she's seeing out there, what people are thinking, where the spending's going or where it's not going at this point. We're going to get into stuff about telehealth, talk a little bit more about what's happening there. Is that still, moving forward and up like it was?
Yeah.
We're going to get into hot topics like AI.
I
mean, because
I have a couple questions.
I don't think
you're
you're allowed to talk about any tech thing anymore without involving AI in some way.
Especially healthcare.
So there you go. Healthcare is involved there too. Cybersecurity.
No, of course.
Another big issue.
Yeah,
and then we'll find out a little bit about what ELO is paying attention to and looking at right now. So,
smart people over there. Absolutely.
There you go. So if you're in the healthcare space, you need to be listening to this one. We're going to hopefully find some opportunities and some trends and some talking points to cash in on here.
Nice.
All that plus our usual value to the VAR. What's TEConnecting with us? It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, our returning guest today is Katharine Cummings. She is the director of the healthcare vertical for ELO. I think we had her about a year ago or so that we had you on last time, kind of talking about some similar trends and issues. And I know we talked a lot about kiosks. We did a webinar together where we had a great discussion about healthcare kiosks and that kind of technology. So
that's booming right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming back, Katharine. You just mentioned, we were talking to you right before we got on, that you are traveling, you're out there seeing customers. What have you been up to for the last year? What's the world been like for you as we've glided out of the pandemic universe?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on again. I'm really thrilled to be here. It's been a kind of a crazy past year. There's a lot more travel happening, a lot more customer visits. We have access to a lot more hospitals as well. So we've been able to actually get into the facilities, see what technologies they're needing and wanting, and have some really great conversations with them about emerging technologies and how we can assist them with things like alleviating administrative burden and streamlining clinical tasks or other tasks for patients, and then also assisting with things that give patients a little bit more autonomy or a little bit more collaboration within their health care. So it's really exciting to see all the new things that are happening in the emerging technology, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about all of it.
Gosh, I didn't even think about it, Katharine, but during the pandemic, you couldn't go visit hospitals.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about how do you make solutions when you can't even walk in the facility?
Exactly. I mean, I know a lot of places kind of like didn't let people come in as much, but in healthcare, it was even more important than anywhere else. Like, no, we cannot afford to have folks trying to sell us stuff.
Yeah, that's got to be refreshing, right, Katharine, to get back in there and meet with your old peeps and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to not have to just do virtual all the time. We've been able to have a lot of technology showcases at hospitals where we can show them everything that we're doing at ELO, and all of our partners are doing as well in a really collaborative approach. So doing that has been kind of really changing the way that we do business obviously during the pandemic to now. So I think it's been really effective, and a lot of our hospitals especially have enjoyed having vendors come in and showcase everything we have going on.
Awesome. Well, part of the reason we wanted to do this particular episode with you, I mean, when we knew we were going to have you back and we were going to be talking healthcare, there was an article I came across a couple months back from around the beginning of the year called "How Technology Will Shape Healthcare in 2023." It's from Healthcare Dive, and I kind of wanted us to to go over some of the talking points they have in there. But maybe before we dive into that and some of the specific trends that they're looking at and paying attention to, I just kind of wanted to get your sense of what's going on in the space right now. And again, I mentioned early on the pandemic, necessitated this rapid adoption of new tech.
Yes, right.
We got
Telehealth
really more invested than ever in telehealth, in video options, trying to figure out new ways to communicate and new ways to connect with patients while keeping them safe and keeping them separate from one another.
Like mobilizing, COVID into parking lots where you can take tests and
Yeah,
stuff like
exactly.
that whole thing. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Stuff like that. All the things that we just never would have thought we did.
mobile
All the things that
healthcare
we
in
probably
parking lots.
should have been heading towards at some point, but just had to do it because, the mother invention thing.
Right.
But now, obviously, that's kind of slowing down a little bit now because, we're now in this space where, again, you can start going into hospitals and clinical settings. Again, people feel a little more comfortable going in person. So, what are you encountering around that right now? What are healthcare orgs saying about tech adoption, about their expectations over the next few years? Are they dialing back a little bit, or is it still moving forward? Are they shifting gears from things that were priorities during the pandemic now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest things that we see are conversations around what would be the biggest bang for their buck or the most effective thing to put in the healthcare facility. A lot of these hospitals are still really hurting from financial loss during the pandemic in the tune of billions of dollars. So we're having these conversations with these facilities on, what will help them in the immediate, improve workflow, assist with that administrative burden, and really, help with staff retention as well, because that's also a big issue that we're seeing. So there's a lot of conversations, obviously, around machine learning and AI and those types of things. But we are also talking to these healthcare facilities a lot about integrating their data, predictive analytics. How do they turn over beds faster? What technologies can we utilize within the facility to ensure that the downtime between admitting a patient or discharging a patient rather, and admitting a new one in that same room is really short. So how do we do really good turnover? There's also a lot of conversations around mental health. How can we ensure that our behavioral health areas in the facility are served just as well as our non-behavioral health areas with technologies? And then lastly, I think there's a lot more conversations about remote patient monitoring, virtual care, especially remote patient monitoring. We see a lot of remote patient monitoring happening in the ICU, where we can actually see what's going on with all of the patient's medical devices on one pane of glass. So we can, again, pull in that predictive analytics, see trends happening with, their oxygenation or what's happening with their arterial monitoring, things like that, where, we can have interventions occur more rapidly so that we can create better outcomes for our patient. And then on the virtual care side, especially in our rural hospitals or facilities that we see that don't have the staffing or don't have the attending physicians who have those specialty care. So infectious disease is a big one, podiatry, cardiology, in these kind of rural communities, we have the ability to bring that to them with virtual care. And I think we're seeing more and more of that happening in all of our environments, not just in rural environments, but long-term care and acute care as well. So I think those are the main things that I've been seeing in the conversations that the ELO team has been having and all of our partners and collaborators have been having in the field too.
Cool. Let's dive into two of those topics, staff retention and virtual care, in just a second. But I got a couple statistics I want to throw out there because, the question is, are things slowing down a little bit? Global digital health investment activity. This is by CB Insight, who it's a company that takes a look at the investment that's coming into healthcare. Contracted. So activity contracted, meaning shrunk in 2022 with a funding falling 57% year over year, and deals, meaning acquisitions and or companies investing in software development companies and stuff like that, reaching a 50-year low. So healthcare funding reached about $25.9 billion in 22. 2022, which again is a 57% drop. So, you're just seeing less money go into it. And I guess, Katharine, to your point though, so let's dive into the staff shortage, right? And it seems like there's a lot of buzz around healthcare around the fact that, healthcare is not immune to the staff shortage pandemic that is happening, I guess, everywhere. And so it sounds like you're getting asked for solutions that can assist in that, right? Whether it's front of house on the patient check-in with kiosks and stuff like that, to even a little bit of the back of the house. But dive a little deeper there. Is that what you're seeing here in the need for more solutions to augment where the staffing is just not there?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, especially in front of house with patient check-in, having a little bit more the self-service aspect in healthcare. The other thing that we're really having conversations about is this idea of ensuring that whatever technology we're putting into a healthcare facility is actually making the clinician workflow more efficient versus adding an extra step for them. Because as far as staff retention go, there's nothing worse. And speaking from experience, right, as a former ICU nurse, there's nothing worse than having a new technology be implemented and it making your day more difficult. So what are we doing to ensure that they're having staff retention because they're taking maybe a little bit off of the clinician's plate, or helping with efficiency for them, or adding a technology that just makes their job a little bit easier, to make sure that they're focusing on patient care and not necessarily administrative tasks, or task nursing, as we like to call it. We want to focus in on what we're doing to care for the patient and not necessarily our checklist or to-do list for the entire day that we have to get done.
I can't imagine a worse scenario than making an ICU environment more taxing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like let's not do that, right? So let's dive into virtual real quick, because you mentioned that as a growth area as well. I wonder though, is virtual care legit? Meaning we kind of had to do it during the pandemic and the telehealth boom and stuff like that. But I always wondered in the back of my mind, well, yeah, but doctors and practitioners, they're going to want people to come back. They're going to want to be able to do that in-person thing. Is it legit, Katharine? Is the healthcare community embracing the advantages that virtual care can bring to the table and stuff like that? Or do you think that that's going to kind of wane a little bit?
I think it's going to get bigger. And, obviously we have those acute care, those hospital care, virtual care environments where we're, having healthcare provider evaluations. There's secure messaging. There's, wearables that connect directly into the virtual care. But I think the biggest area of growth that we're going to see is actually for chronic condition management. So people with COPD, people with congestive heart failure, those disease processes that need long-term management by a provider. And, we have a lot of patients when I was working in the hospital that we would call frequent flyers, who would come in a lot because they simply didn't understand or realize that managing their illness at home was imperative to long-term health. And they would come in over and over again with the same complaints or the same issues. And a lot of it was because they didn't have a way to manage their chronic illness at home. So I think what we're going to see more of is the virtual care environment for chronic illness becoming extremely important, especially insurance companies, I think, are going to start adopting this, especially these providers for, cardiology, pulmonology, that have these patients that require years of constant monitoring. So I think that is where we're going to see the most growth, is that chronic care management, and not necessarily the acute care environment. Because the acute care environment, we know exactly what's needed, right? But the chronic care is an area that is a little bit untapped. So I believe we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there was a little bit of a hesitation, lack of trust, and maybe in some of the technology and stuff like that. But to your point, it has its advantages. And interesting to note on the wearables side, of course, I got my little watch here, but it's more than just that, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
The types of wearables. Yeah, right.
Well, I think too, where this conversation kind of going right now, and what really stands out to me is the idea of solutions that are beyond just basic healthcare technology stuff. I just think right now, like if your goal is to go out and try to sell some barcode scanners or a labeling solution for samples or, mobile computers, just the basic run of the mill stuff, you're going to find, it's going to be slow going. It's going to be hard to tread water because again, obviously, there's always a lot of those solutions out
sure.
there. But more
Yeah.
importantly, it's just not the stuff that's moving the needle and getting people excited or engaged in healthcare. If they need it, they're going to reach out and connect with you. Maybe you get a nice deal out of it. Fine. But it feels like right now the solutions and the stuff that are interesting people that moves the needle and gets them interested is the stuff when you start talking about things like virtual care, when you start talking about solutions that are bigger and more expansive, that are helping expand healthcare to places where maybe hasn't been going before, or helping solve problems that are very unique to healthcare that simple hardware doesn't. I think back to last year, we had 2 big episodes, and they were both tied into 2 big marketing campaigns that we did last year on behalf of these folks. One was Kevin Leal. We had one from V1. We had Tim Keeblebeck from Ambient. So you had V1, which was all about these virtual care solutions, this virtual care continuum type solution. Ambient, which focuses on sepsis in particular.
Yep, right.
Both of those, from a marketing standpoint, we went out and did a marketing campaign, were gangbusters. People were really interested in hearing more about those solutions. They were interested in requesting content about those solutions, because again, it's more than just here's another inventory tracking solution, here's another asset management solution for healthcare. It's so much bigger than that. It's about solutions, things like, again, the sepsis thing. Hey, when you've got people that are dying in the hospitals because you can't manage properly all the different aspects of sepsis and all the different identifying markers, people are going in with one problem, getting sick with sepsis and having other issues on the back end. Or when you've got rural areas that aren't getting the treatment and health that they need, communities that just don't get reached out to because they don't have access to this stuff. That's the stuff I think that healthcare organizations are really care about and they're passionate about, and they should be. You'd hope they are. So I just feel like that's I think the point we're at now, which is if you want to be part of whatever the next stage of healthcare tech is, you've got to start making partnerships on new levels of technology, especially on the software side, especially on new solutions beyond the basic. You're not going to play anymore if all you want to do is try to find the next hospital that needs some barcode scanners,
right,
to buy them from.
But I think Katharine brought up an interesting point on the insurance side, which is I guess it's unique to healthcare. Maybe not unique, but it is an anomaly, a little bit of an anomaly, right? In the sense the insurance companies need to embrace when these new technologies are implemented, because if the healthcare entity can't bill for it, why would they do it? Now they're getting into even worse financial shape. Is that true, Katharine? I mean, is part of this having the insurance companies embrace these adoptions as well?
Well, I think in general, healthcare is a bit of a laggard in adopting new technology. I think we all know that. So there has to be so much data behind whether or not a technology works, which is, why we're not seeing machine learning and artificial intelligence being adopted as quickly in healthcare as we're seeing in other industries. But I do think that there are a lot more healthcare facilities who are equipping these patients with different tools to manage their chronic illnesses, because if they don't do that and the patient comes back 3, 5, 6 days later, the hospital is now responsible for paying for that patient's care. It's not the insurance company, it's not the patient. It's, they have to prove that they did all of this education with the patient, they gave them all the tools. And if they did all of those things right, then the insurance company will, have the patient pay for it, or the insurance company will pay for it. But if the hospital doesn't do their due diligence and push all of these tools towards the patient, do the appropriate education, then the hospital is now responsible for that readmission and paying for all of that patient care.
Those readmission, that's a more than 4-letter word that speaks as a 4-letter word to the healthcare industry for
Absolutely.
Sure. So, Katharine, you've mentioned the chronic illness thing a couple of times now, and that was a big part of this Healthcare Dive article that talks about the shift in telehealth and the way that healthcare is starting to think about telehealth now is moving away from just the standard, I'm sick, I got a cough, I'm going to do a telehealth visit to get some medicine or whatever. Although I think there's still a lot of value in that, frankly, of not having to run to the doctor's office every time you get a little bit of sickness. Yeah. But it sounds like in general where they really think there could be value in telehealth and investment moving forward is emphasizing chronic care treatments, emphasizing high value healthcare, as they call it. So maybe explain a little bit more about what you're seeing there and what does that mean from like the hardware and software standpoint? What needs to be done to implement or to move telehealth to this level to start treating those kind of illnesses, and again raise that awareness with the patient when they're not on site to make sure that they're not coming back in and getting readmitted and costing the hospital more money.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things that we're seeing, or a couple of different trends. I think the first one I mentioned earlier is this idea of predictive analytics. So if a patient has congestive heart failure, they say, you don't want a certain weight gain from one day to the other. So predictive analytics would show this patient has had a 7-pound weight gain over the last week. They're a high risk for readmission. And with that virtual care for chronic illness management, you can put that information into a database, or the patient can call it in daily, and have the clinical staff kind of managing what the chronic illness care looks like. And they can call the patient and say, hey, what's going on? Do we need to do some additional education, whatever that looks like? And then the other side of it, we also talked about a little bit too, is that idea of patients having wearables. The wearables market in healthcare, I think, is getting really, really big. Obviously, you and I have our Apple Watch or our Garmin's or all of those types of things, and those are extremely common. But we're seeing a lot more wearables being pushed into the home, that are not just watches, but things that do a little bit more, like take blood pressures, for example, constantly monitoring patients' heart rates, things like that, that allow us to have a little bit more insight into what might be happening in the patient home. And, something I think is also really cool is the fact that a lot of the AICDs, defibrillators, we can actually see what's happening with them. So if there's a run of an irregular heart rate now, a physician can go in and actually see, hey, something funny happened in this patient's heart rhythm at this time. And they, this happened recently with my dad. Hi, Dad, by the way. And, the doctor was able to go, what were you doing that day? Right? Oh, I was walking outside in the hot sun and my heart rate got really high. So we can actually assist patients in their care a little bit more when we have those kind of analytics or additional tools to ensure that their chronic illnesses are being managed better.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, this is part of where that technology is really just kind of like fascinating to watch. I mean, the wearables, tying it into data, right? Then you need, I love the single pane of glass that you mentioned earlier, Katharine, right? It's like, okay, here's all the information coming in, just an avalanche of information coming in, but got to distill it down to the bare essentials of, and how can this now affect a good patient outcome, whether it's chronic or otherwise. That's just fascinating to me.
Well, and that's been a regular ongoing conversation in healthcare for a while now, of all these different sources. Like maybe whether you're going to different types of clinics, different types of doctors, maybe they're not all part. I mean, I know like around this area, where we are, and here in northern Kentucky, like we have one big provider that a lot of the other providers are tied to. So typically a lot of what I do is tied together with, in one EMR, one EHR for everybody to see in all these different places. But that's not always the case. Katharine, you're in New York City right now. I know that's a place in particular where people have a lot of problems with this, where they're seeing lots of different types of providers that are not interconnected in any way.
Not connected at all.
So you go to one place and they diagnose or treat you for something. Your other practitioner...
And they send you somewhere else maybe.
Maybe give you a medicine or something. Your other practitioner has no idea what they're doing, has no idea what they're doing might affect what they're doing. Yeah. And so, there's not that cohesive kind of, bringing everything together. And to Katharine's point also, like the wearables market, whether it's the stuff that we already are doing or whatever they can give you, is just more data points that if we can find out great ways to pull all this together and create that single pane of glass where your healthcare team can spot and see when things are happening. I love that example you gave. I think about that too. Like I've got the healthcare app. We've all got it. If you wear an Apple device, you got a healthcare app. It's tied into the watch. There's data I can add to it. Sometimes I'll go in there and thumb through and be like, man, there's so much useful data here. And then I also think, does my doctor have access to any of this? Is there stuff in here my doctor doesn't even know about? Is there things that if he saw, he might go, hey, John, maybe we need to dial it back on, the hamburgers this week or something, looks like this particular level's a little off right now. I would love that. I think that would be fantastic. And I think hopefully that's the world we're hoping we're going to try to get to. Yeah. It's just a matter of figuring out how we get there at the end.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, interoperability is certainly another 4-letter word that's not really a 4-letter word in healthcare. So.
Okay. Well, I get it. All right. Well, you mentioned AI earlier, and obviously, the healthcare is a little slow on the uptake and bringing in AI, but also at the same time, right now, everyone is talking AI. There's not an industry, I think, that isn't trying to figure out how AI can be crammed into it somehow, for better or for worse, whether it needs to or not. But AI has also been part of the conversation in healthcare for a long time.
Yes.
To figure out like how does that fit in? How can we use it to
on the predictive side?
Yeah,
and things
exactly.
of that
How can we
nature,
use it to predict things better? How
Right.
can we use it to help out with, labor? How can we use it to make sure we're not missing things, diagnoses, drugs, all that kind of stuff? So tell us a little bit more about that. What it's obviously it's this hot topic. What's the potential for healthcare right now? What are you seeing out there? What are people trying to do using AI in healthcare?
Well, I think AI and machine learning has like a pretty massive impact on healthcare in general. I think the things that we're seeing most often is with artificial intelligence, we're able to more quickly analyze things like CT scans, other types of scans to improve cancer diagnostics, for example, biopsies, cell mutations we're able to see more quickly with artificial intelligence as well. With AI in general, we're seeing a lot of adoption, obviously, at the medical device company level, using artificial intelligence in different different devices that they're building out, so that they can ensure that there's less opportunity for human error. And kind of along that, I actually wanted to ask you guys a question. There's a gentleman named Bill Russell, who I follow on LinkedIn. And he actually said something on LinkedIn the other day that really resonated with me. He does a poll every single Monday. And the poll a couple of weeks ago was that we accept a higher error rate by humans than we will ever accept with AI with regard to human life. And humans can make mistakes that may lead someone to die, which is obviously extremely tragic, but human error is understood and it really, we deem like an acceptable risk a lot of the time. So if we adopt AI, like, does this have ramifications in healthcare, and will our tolerance for human error with AI assistance become lower? Like, what is the acceptable
Really
threshold?
good point. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to bring that up because I think that was like, it really resonated with me. Like, what's the acceptable error rate for AI in healthcare? Are we willing to accept error rate with AI and machine learning and all of those things? And, obviously there's going to be a lot more questions that come around that topic, especially, but I think artificial intelligence is truly a marvel, and we should be adopting that, because if it assists us at all with being able to reduce human error, especially with things like cancer diagnoses or other diagnoses that are life-altering, then I think we should embrace it wholeheartedly, truly.
I agree. I mean, I think that that's a really interesting, philosophical question to ask, because if human error is, I don't know, 10%.
Right,
I mean,
right.
to err is human. Is that
right?
Right. Sorry. So
we've adapted some acceptable risk.
Yeah. So then you augment it with AI. So does that 10% now go down to 2%, and that's acceptable? I mean, I think that, I don't know. So here's my answer without lawyers in the room. that yes, I would think that people would be accepting of it, because to your point, Catherine, and what I've read is that, AI truly can have not just a little impact, like significant impact, especially on the diagnosis side and things of that nature, where it may not be perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than, a radiologist looking at thousands of whatever, and trying to discern that. It's just going to do a much, much better job than that. Now, what I meant by the lawyers is, of course, they'll come in and say, well, we've got case studies and stuff like that, and they'll just muck everything up. But, in general,
I think at the end of the day, I mean, I think to Catherine's point, at some point you're going to hit this point where people do feel like, hey, if this exists and it can make things better, then I expect things to typically be better. I'll give you an example. It seems like far off and yet still fits in with the mentality.
Mm-hmm.
All right. When I get an email from somebody or a message, especially if it's a corporate message or a marketing email that was supposedly vetted, and it's got spelling errors or grammatical mistakes or coherent mistakes, and I think to myself, all right, I've got Grammarly on my desktop.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to actually put together an email and have, at least even beyond my own skills, have an AI program that will say, hey, this might be reworded for clarity, or hey, you misspelled this, you left some punctuation out there.
Right.
If I can do that, and granted, yes, it is my job also, but even as a consumer, why not? Well, I should expect that from others.
Yes.
So it's one of those things when I get those emails now,
I see.
I'm frustrated and annoyed by that because I know that this exists and I know how simple and easy it is to fix these problems before you ever put that message out into
So you're
the world.
making the argument the AI is going to be the expectation, right? That you would expect healthcare providers to be using and augmenting their workflows.
I think once
to the
that
advantage.
happens, I think once you cross that Rubicon and you've reached the point where you've got healthcare providers that are doing it. And the problem, let's be honest, the problem that's going to be, it's going to start off like in your Mayo clinics and your, New York City hospitals, some of the biggest healthcare organizations in the world will be doing it. And it won't trickle down probably for a while because it's going to be probably cost, prohibitive in some ways, I imagine, over time. Maybe. I don't know. But I think it's going to start becoming a competitive differentiator as well.
Yes.
And then and hopefully it also doesn't become a haves and have-nots thing where I have access to the nice healthcare systems that have the AI, so my chances of having any particular problems or issues are even more minimal versus, again, when you go out to like rural health, community health centers,
they
all
don't
of a
have
sudden,
that technology.
they don't have that, and the rates are still high. The risk rates and the death rates are still high because of it.
Yeah. Do you see that happening, Catherine? Like there might be a classification of healthcare, those that have AI or those entities that do, and they'll use it from a differentiation standpoint to those that aren't in using it? Is this where it could go?
There are, what we would call the early adopters, probably most of the teaching hospitals that are going to be doing all of the research and everything. Just, to kind of go back to the original article that you brought up on Healthcare Dive, there is a kind of a lack of the randomized controlled trials that we need to fully adopt AI in these medical facilities. There's just a really small amount of them, and it has to reach a threshold really for us to be able to widely adopt AI. And we're doing it, right? Hospitals are doing it, but not at the rate as a lot of other industries. And to kind of bring back another point that I brought up earlier around staff retention, things like that, and really taking the burden off of the staff, I think there's something to be said about artificial intelligence augmenting and supporting clinical staff to make their jobs easier. Not that they're going to become lazy or anything, but there's a big burden, especially when you're diagnosing people or potentially misdiagnosing them. And artificial intelligence additionally will allow a lot of physicians to improve their decision making, make their decision making shorter. They can avoid the misdiagnosis. They can avoid unnecessary procedures as well, which I think is extremely important, especially if a patient is extremely ill and doesn't want to continue to undergo these procedures. And they can recommend treatment faster, so faster time to care. So it helps kind of alleviate some of those additional burdens from the healthcare providers, the clinicians who are seeing these patients, who are making sure that they're getting the appropriate diagnostic tests done. And I think that, as we do more randomized controlled trials and studies for AI and machine learning, we're going to see a lot more hospitals, likely starting with the teaching hospitals again, adopting this technology and making it a standard across all of healthcare.
Seems to make sense.
Yeah, it does. So one last thing I'll add on the AI side here. This was a quote from the article that I found interesting, which is not necessarily, we've been talking about a lot of from the clinical decision making and, improving care and preventing risks and deaths and all that stuff or whatever. But, they're pointing out, hey, there's other opportunities here. It says more providers will weave AI into their operations for uses in revenue cycle management, clinical decision support, obviously connected there too, and patient engagement, experts predicted. Payers will also look to find efficiencies using technology and discover new ways to use data they collect as healthcare organizations struggle with the growing disconnect between consumer expectations and the reality of the healthcare experience.
That's right.
And competition from market entrants like Amazon and Walmart. So, I think, if maybe you're worried about how do I get, the big picture, where again, if you're talking about just teaching hospitals and high level organizations, getting into the clinical side of the AI, there's probably going to be opportunities for other stuff related to AI. When you think of stuff just like, the buying department, and managing supplies, or, they mentioned the revenue cycle management, simple patient engagement, even just, having AI, available to help send out, reminders.
With the language model and stuff like that. Yeah. More
exactly.
conversational. Absolutely.
So I think there's going to be other opportunities there. Don't think of it as just a say, I've got to go out and find the big solution that's going to, make sure no one ever dies in a hospital again. And, there might be more smaller opportunities out there to partner up with AI. I think of some of the folks we've talked to, like, I don't know, like say like a wait time, for instance.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's probably some kind of I know they're mostly in hospitality, but there's probably something in a similar concept of making sure patients are treated on time and they're not waiting too long to see a doctor or waiting too long in an ER.
Right.
Stuff like that AI can potentially be part of too.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Are you saying that I'm not going to get my healthcare robot anytime soon?
No.
Catherine, I was kind of counting on, some little robot at home that does all this. No?
No, I think I'm just going to be honest with you. I think we're a little ways off from,
Dang it.
doctor race.
Not sure people want robots putting catheters in, but
no. Yeah, that's a really good point, Catherine. Yeah.
They're not going to quite have the bedside manner that you want,
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Maybe if you can get actually, I don't even want to say this, the EMH from Star Trek, they had the emergency medical hologram. But if you ever watched that show at the beginning, his bedside manner was pretty awful. They had to leave him running for a long time and, to start adapting and learn how to be a little more human. So I don't think we're ready for that yet.
Gotcha.
All right, well, let's wrap up talking about cybersecurity, and I want to reference a few stats that came out of this article here. Which says
so this is an issue. This is a pretty big issue.
It's always it's a scary, depressing issue, but I think it's even more elevated in healthcare because this is one place where a business shutting down for any amount of time will literally potentially cost lives.
Yes.
So it said ransomware attacks on hospitals doubled between 2016 and 2021. 42 million patients' data was exposed. And they also mentioned there would be that there's an up to 15% increase in cybersecurity budgets expected this year. So talk to us a little bit more about that, Catherine. How does this push to keep securing patient data, combating these ransomware attacks, making sure that hospitals are insulated against anything that could shut them down? How's that impacting our VARs right now selling to these healthcare companies? What should they be thinking about as part of that conversation, even if they're not necessarily a cybersecurity expert?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I have conversations with are the different, at least in the clinical environment, are the different peripherals that we can add to make nurse workstations, clinical workstations more secure and to validate that we are seeing the correct patient. Not just, what's your name and your birthday, but are we doing any biometric scanning to ensure that we're actually caring for the correct person, which is a huge area of security and privacy and all of that. So, recently I had a conversation with a company called AuthX. They do facial recognition in healthcare. They get integrated directly into Epic Welcome and Cerner and Meditech and all of the other ones. And they do a lot of biometric scanning on that cybersecurity side. So when a patient comes in and they have an identical twin, you know that the patient that you're seeing is the actual patient, not their identical twin who's drug seeking or getting, seeing a physician, or they might have insurance and they're pursuing healthcare on the twins identification. So we're seeing a lot more of that. We're also seeing a lot more of the clinicians have immediate sign off when they leave their workstation. So they're not actually going to have to press a log off button at their workstation to protect privacy, things like that. And a lot of hospitals are investing in those types of peripherals or peripheral technology at the nurse workstations, at the bedside, areas like that. But as far as like the ransomware and additional cybersecurity goes, that's part of every single conversation that we have. How are we protecting our organization from ransomware attacks? And while ELO doesn't have any software technology that assists with that, we certainly have a lot of partners who do. So we try to have really collaborative conversations, not just with our ELO team about our hardware that we can provide, but with all of our partners as well, who provide the different aspects to make the solution exactly what the hospital is asking for or desiring for their facility. So we go in kind of with this really collaborative approach to ensure that they're getting the hardware they need, but they're also getting that cybersecurity tools or technology that they need to make the solution secure for their organization.
Partner assisted solutions.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Hey,
Yeah.
that sounds familiar.
I only
yeah.
bring that up, Catherine, because it's like John and I just preach that like every single podcast, and now there's our line right there.
Right.
You're right. You do. You need those partners in order to facilitate that. Certainly on the cybersecurity side, I will agree with you. We are seeing an uptake in like single sign-on or secured sign-on to devices. Huge. That's one of those areas that you can. There's the technology there to clamp that down. So that just becomes not an issue in the cyber world. There's plenty of other issues to deal with. Let's not deal with the fact that of the sign-on process. So yeah, really fascinating and big ise
Yeah. I mean, and again, you don't have to be the cybersecurity expert, but you want to make sure that especially any partners you're working with, that you've vetted them and assured that they are secure, because again, you don't want to be you don't want to be the one responsible for any kind of this access issues or leaks or any point of attack that someone could have into a healthcare facility. Yep. I think it's stuff even like I remember when I was working with RFIDs a few years ago, and we talked about the single sign-on like for printers, for instance.
Yeah, exactly.
And not even like not the kind
edge.
Exactly. It's an edge peripheral of sorts. Like we're talking even like just like copiers or like the printer you use just to go whip up something or whatever and print out a sheet that you hand to somebody or label printers even. Sometimes those can be this very simple point of entry that a hacker can use to get into an entire system. And it's stuff like that where if that's not part of your conversation, because if they're not asking you about it, they should be. I'm going to assume most healthcare or IT people at this point.
I think it's table stakes, right? You got to have a security position.
So if you're trying to go in and sell something and you haven't even remotely thought about the security angle of it yet, you're probably going to get just turned around and shown right out the door before you even get to have that conversation.
Yeah, but to Catherine's point, and it's good. There's an ecosystem here, right? You can lean on your partners to assist in those areas.
Yep, very much so. All right, well, in a moment we're going to let Catherine talk a little bit about maybe some other predictions and trends and opportunities she and ELO are watching right now in healthcare. But before we do that, first of all, we always want to thank our sponsors of the TEConnect podcast, the program. Big thank you to ELO. ELO has been very supportive of the podcast since the very beginning. You guys are always on board with the TEConnect program. You always lend us plenty of great guests.
Absolutely.
So we very much appreciate ELO's support, and thanks for lending us Catherine today. As always, if you like the show, we kind of want to know.
Yep.
We're
it's really easy.
We're coming up on 150 episodes, so we're doing this in part because we enjoy doing it, but we assume that people enjoy consuming it as well.
And they do.
But we want to hear from you. It helps, it's believe it or not, it's just nice sometimes to know that, that people are out there listening, that they're paying attention.
Maybe there's an area in healthcare we didn't tap on that you want to know about. Yes.
If you want to know more of this stuff, if you heard of this list today and said, you know what, I really like what Catherine had to say about AI.
But I wish they had asked her this question.
Exactly. Send us that stuff. Tell us. We'll bring her back on and ask that additional question.
Absolutely.
We'll get into these topics some more, but you have to tell us. There's always a link in the show notes where you can send us in any topic for the podcast. Just go and type it in. Say, hey, I want to hear about this. I think you guys should talk about that. Whether we use it or not, we'll send you a TEConnect podcast t-shirt. That alone is a good reason to do it. There's
Absolutely.
no cost to you, just, a moment of your time to give us an idea. And of course, you follow us on LinkedIn. Make sure you're always following BlueStar on LinkedIn because we're always putting up recaps of the pod every week up there. So if you miss one, you can get at least a nice recap. You can also see all the other cool stuff we got going on around BlueStar. Make sure you keep up with us, events that we're doing, webinars that are coming up. And of course, if you want to reach out to us directly here on the podcast, you can always find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can also email us, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap up here first with our value to the VAR. And Catherine, as I mentioned, I want to hear from you if there's anything else. We talked mostly about the stuff that was in this article, but are there any other predictions, any other growth opportunities that you and ELO are watching out for right now, or working on solutions for?
Yeah, I think, just as far as value to the VAR goes, I wanted to really emphasize the fact that, part of ELO's value add is really that collaboration piece. We really couldn't do what we do without our partners, and everything that we do, we approach from a collaborative approach or partnership approach. So, I really wanted to emphasize that. But a couple of other interesting emerging technologies that we've been following is this idea of bioprinting. And bioprinting is essentially 3D printing of live human tissue. How are we? I don't know if there's necessarily a play for ELO there, but it's certainly something that we are following, looking at, seeing, what's happening there. I know that Ohio State University their medical center has been doing a lot of testing there. And so that's certainly something that I think is really interesting and we're following. The other thing I think we're following pretty closely is this idea of augmented or virtual reality in healthcare. We're seeing a lot more of that as well. And, we're following ways that we can get plugged into augmented and virtual reality in healthcare. And if that makes sense, really, for ELO as a company. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I mean, it's a cool technology in general, but it certainly could make a virtual care visit a lot more interesting if it was virtual reality and you feel as if you're actually talking to a person in the same room as them. So certainly something that we're following as well.
I thought you were going to go virtual, like flying through the body, being able to diagnose stuff
That would be
by
pretty cool too,
zooming
yeah.
through veins
I'm sure you could do
and
that
stuff
too,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Or was
I
that a
feel like
sci-fi
that's
movie?
Yeah.
That's like a magic school bus thing, if you remember
There
that.
you go.
Just
Yeah.
going through the human body.
No doubt. Now, the tissue printing, that's an interesting one
Yeah.
there. I mean, I think that was on like one of my TEConnecting with
Probably,
you where,
yeah.
like they were able to print a blob or something like that. But,
Right.
like printing an eye or something like that, or
Yeah.
an ear,
Yeah.
or that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I don't know. Imagine yourself
can
30
you
years
imagine?
from now. Hey, can you give me a new arm? This
Well,
one's little,
and think about like organ replacement. Think about
Oh,
all these
yeah,
folks that
for
are always
sure.
on transplant lists. Having to wait. I mean, it's kind of morbid. You got to wait for somebody to die so you can get their
Right,
organ.
right,
Imagine
right.
being like, hey, we can 3D print up that
Yeah.
organ that you need, and
yeah. Oh, hold on. Let me just
plug
turn
it
on the
in.
machine
Yeah,
real quick.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I think, a piece of it is that organ care or, that being a part of it, or implants, things like that. But I think that the main tests that they're doing currently are like ears, corneas, bones, skin. I think it'll be especially important for people who are burn victims, for skin grafts, things like that, things that we can really assist with having better quality of life for patients.
What a wonderful world.
No doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That would
no
be
doubt.
so cool.
That's the kind of innovation I will absolutely praise and enjoy.
No
seeing,
doubt.
so.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add here, is that we've hinted about this a few times already, is looking at specialty departments within healthcare and finding out what they need, what their solutions are. Katharine, you mentioned very early on, mental health and behavioral health in particular. It's a department where there's a lot of funding coming in, where there's a lot of social discussion around it. There's a lot of political discussion around it. It's one of those things that we know we need to figure out how to address. So if you're working with folks that have solutions, or you have solutions that can help out with those particular departments, it's rather than trying to tackle like, what can I get out of the hospital as a whole? What can I sell that's going to be, used across an entire healthcare system? Maybe you step into a family planning center. Maybe you step into, the OBGYN area or something, and have a conversation with them and say, hey, what are your particular problems and issues that you're dealing with right now? Where could technology help you out? Maybe start small, and that stuff could potentially grow over time to other areas. But I think, to me, it's one of those, it's kind of something you do in a lot of industries where you find the pain point and you find a challenge in one part of a business, go in there and solve their problem, and that opens some doors up to the rest of the way.
Right.
And I think a lot of people in healthcare know this as well, but I think right now is the time to really go in and figure out, like, what's the difference between, what's happening in certain departments of healthcare versus the overall system that maybe you can go in and address and start small.
I agree with you. And if you're already in healthcare, it's incumbent upon you to understand the solutions that continue to grow, that are maybe outside of your core that can help your current customers in their solutions, right? I mean, that's what a true solutions integrator will do, is become that trusted advisor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Agree. All right, well, hey, let's wrap up the show with our favorite segment, What's TEConnecting with You?
Yeah, right.
This is where we talk about something in the world of science, tech, business, innovation.
Maybe
or
even healthcare.
Just some random story we feel like chatting about and having a discussion about. So, Katharine, I'll let you kick it off. What's TEConnecting with You right now?
So I've been following a gentleman on social media named Bryan Johnson, and he's super interesting. He's this guy who's trying to basically reverse the aging process in his own body so that he has the body, mind, organ system, everything of an 18-year-old.
Oh,
And
wow.
I love this.
really wild. It's called Project Blueprint, and it's super fascinating to me. And essentially, he's taking all of these daily supplements. He has a team of over 30 physicians monitoring all of his blood counts, all the blood levels. He's on a strict diet. He eats the same exact food every single day. He has a calorie restriction. He does certain workouts, a sleep routine. He wears these wearables. it's pretty wild to see. And so he's doing it. I think his father is doing it, and one of his sons is doing it with him. And they actually just selected their first female to do this regimen as well, which I think is really awesome, because women's health is so different because of our hormonal cycles and the need for more sleep, things like that. So I'm really intrigued, obviously, and I'm also really interested to see how Project Blueprint really focuses in on women's health. So that is my what's connecting with me. I'm really excited to see what happens next.
That's awesome.
That's really kind of cool. So how is it going for him so far?
I think that it's going well. He's been able to reverse his natural age back by several years based off of his biomarkers, which is pretty wild. He's super fit. All of his blood
but what's the diet?
Really
what's he eating? You know, I'm sure there's no.
I think it's a totally vegan diet.
I was going to say there's no Chick-fil-A in there, right?
Yeah, no Chick-fil-A. None of the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Dean's like, nope, I'm out. Sorry, can't do it. Well, I very much appreciate the equity angle that you mentioned there too, though, because you're right. So let's be honest, we know the history of healthcare. So much of it was built around men, and white men probably for that matter too. So it's nice to see that when someone acknowledges, like, hey, how can this be spun off into to other members of our society that justify and have just as much of a stake in their healthcare as anyone else.
Project Blueprint, is that what it's called again, Catherine?
Project Blueprint. You guys should look it up. It's super interesting.
Oh, for sure. We'll do. Yeah. Anti-aging
see how much of this I could possibly handle to de-age myself at all.
I need to start rewinding the clock immediately. So I'm in. I don't know if I can do the diet regimen.
Just get me back to 40. If I can just get back to 40 at this point, I think I'd be okay with that.
That's right. Yeah.
Just shave off these last
41, just 1 year, right? 41.
Oh yeah,
that's
sure.
So nice. So nice. Yeah. Brownie points.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that. I should have said 30, then it would have sounded even better. So all right, Dean, what's TEConnecting with you?
Do you think our society's having a little bit of a moment and that it's tough for people to get along sometimes, you know?
I mean,
have you noticed that maybe a little bit?
When have we not had that moment? But yes, it's probably been more obvious than ever. Yeah.
Okay, well, Northwestern University has got a solution for us. They've implanted wireless devices, triggers.
Okay, this is already off to a bad start.
No. Well, it's healthcare related. Implanted wireless device triggers mice to form instant bonds. So this is the first, and Catherine, have you heard of this? Optogenetics. This is the use of light to manipulate neurons within your brain, right? So these are light transmitters, and they did a study. So for the first time, Northwestern engineers and neurobiologists have wirelessly programmed and then deprogrammed mice to socially interact with one another in real time in both positive and negative ways. So, you know, in the old days, maybe a couple of years ago, the fact that it's wireless is significant here, because they'd wire up these mice and there'd be wires hanging off of them.
Right.
And so it's really hard to do a social experiment when you look like, you know, you've got
when you look like a Borg mouse. Yeah.
So the fact that they went wireless now, and they can kind of hide everything, but they can still manipulate the neurons within the brain, they were able to effectively do that. So basically, you know, they did experiments where they triggered using the light, where people would, or the mice would act socially. They were exposed to a longer social cycle, but they can manipulate kind of the behavior around it, good and bad. So, you know, maybe this is our solution to societal woes someday, is that when Elon plugs us all in with that neuro
Did it have to be thing? Elon? Come on.
Okay, or you name the mad billionaire.
That's already
Jeff
part
Bezos,
of the problem. Okay, we're not getting any better here.
We're not. Well, mad scientist of some sort, it comes up with the solution with these neuro things. I don't know, Catherine. Are we going to manipulate people with light sensors and
I feel like that sounds like a villain origin story there. You know,
that's a good point.
Yeah, my mind. Okay, so you know, my mind always goes to, like, I build the science fiction story out of it.
Oh yeah.
So I'm immediately thinking, like, all right, you mentioned that you can do positive or negative.
Yes.
So, like, let's say you have this, like, wonderful idealistic society where you've implanted this stuff and everybody's nicer and more charming. And to Catherine's point, some supervillain comes along, some egomaniac comes along and figures out how to flip the switch to turn us into Purge World or something all of a sudden, you know? Like, come on.
That's the reality of what would really happen, right?
Yeah, the desire to change human behavior is always one of my favorite,
isn't it? Yes.
efforts in the world of
Yes,
technology. Like, how
yes.
can we make people be better people? And
Well, there you go. Light neurons.
Light neurons, I guess.
Light
We go to world.
manipulation of neurons. So
All right.
what's tech connecting with you?
All right, so mine isn't quite as game changing, I guess, maybe from a societal perspective. But there's an interesting article I came across, science.org. Dream Glove boosts creativity during sleep.
Dream Glove.
So there was a study that was done where they basically brought a bunch of people in, and I think it was 50 volunteers, mostly students and professors at MIT. And basically, they had them either stay awake or take a nap. Now, the nap group apparently laid down. They had an eye mask on, and they put a glove-like device, which is mostly just like some sensors around the fingers. And the
I'm
wrist
thinking
or
Michael
whatever.
Jackson here.
No,
Okay.
not like a legit glove. It's called Dormio. So it's got all these sensors that measure their heart rate, muscle tone changes. Basically, the glove, all it's really doing is tracking sleep changes, identifying.
So it's a
exactly-
wearable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When people are falling asleep, essentially.
Okay.
And then, so they have different groups that they're working with here as part
Mm-hmm.
of. They split them up. So one group, before they went to sleep, they told them to think about trees as they're falling asleep.
Okay.
And then essentially, and this is the part, it's kind of annoying, but they're using the glove to identify as they fall asleep. And as soon as they're drifting off, they're making them essentially wake up again. So like basically, I
that's
think
mean.
they said like about every 5 minutes. So basically, several times over 45 minutes, they're waking them up, asking them questions, and asking them to say what's on their minds or what they're thinking about or dreaming about.
Okay.
And then you had a control group that basically just slept, and then you had a group that was asked to stay awake and think about trees, and a group that was asked to just stay awake and think about other stuff. And basically, what the goal of this was to determine like how their creativity was affected after the fact.
Okay.
And basically, what they found out is, for one, the people that they told to think about trees, when they were waking them constantly, were dreaming about trees. Like
Okay.
big, grandiose dreams related to trees. And this article is interesting because it kind of tells you some of the stuff they were dreaming about. Like, there's one guy that somebody said that one remembered having arms made of old wood. Another recalled being so big that he could eat trees like finger food.
Uh-huh.
And
He must have been
basically what
hungry.
they found out is on the back end, let me see if I can find some of the stats here, that a lot of the folks who were given this instruction ahead of time and were given the opportunity to wake up had much higher creativity metrics. The idea behind it being that during those times of sleep when you're kind of like drifting in and out a little bit, your mind is still working very deeply and there's a lot of creativity happening there. But because you're kind of in and out, you forget it very quickly and you're not accessing most of that
Yes. Okay.
later on.
Right.
So here's some of the stats. Overall, volunteers who dreamed about trees scored 78% higher on the creativity metrics than those who stayed awake just observing their thoughts, and 63% higher than those who stayed awake thinking about trees. Participants who napped without hearing the prompt still got a creativity boost, but those who dreamed about trees still performed 48% better than them.
Well, what is it about trees?
Well, it's not the tree thing. It was
okay,
just
all right.
that was what they used as the example.
The stimulator.
They made him think about trees. And
Okay.
basically, when they'd have these people come out, they'd have them write stories or do drawings, do
okay.
some kind of creative work. And those who were given the prompt as they were falling asleep were more likely to write really fascinating, in-depth, stories about
Creative,
trees.
right.
Make creative drawings. There was a lot more creativity to those that were given those prompts and kind of pushed a little
Understood.
bit
Got it.
into creative dreaming and thought than those that just had a regular
Random
nap.
thought.
So,
Right. Yeah.
So it's just interesting, it's just an idea. We've always, I think a lot of people think hey, I had great ideas when I slept sometimes, and maybe you remember them, but most likely you're forgetting most of that stuff. And maybe there's a way we can find, a way to tap into that and bring that creativity back to the surface.
I also
You
find it
just set
fascinating.
your alarm for, every 45 minutes to wake you up all night long. Right?
Become creative.
There's some novelist or writer musician out there somewhere. It's probably going to try to do that just to see if they can get better content out of that.
I also find it interesting that these are MIT people that use themselves as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Hey,
true.
Right?
There you go.
They're not just the mad scientists. They're the ones actually, you can try it out on them.
Exactly. All right, that's what's Tech Connecting with us. Katharine Cummings from ELO. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
We always love having you on. We'll get you back here again sometime.
Absolutely.
We do have to unplug, but until next time, dream about some trees. Reverse yourself back to 18 years old. And I guess let yourself be manipulated by light to be a better person, or at least a better mouse.
Not diabolical.
I just keep thinking of like Borg mouse, like just, hey guys, want to hang out? All right, I'm done. Until next time, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect Podcast is brought to you by Zebra. Space is at a premium in most businesses, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would think so.
So
Absolutely.
why would you waste space with a big, bulky printer?
Really good point.
Yeah.
No, you need that space.
Yeah, you
to
need
do
a space.
stuff.
Well, Zebra's ZD611 series premium desktop printers are compact 2-inch devices with a big impact, featuring next-gen technology, performance, and security for years of superior printing.
I like it.
The ZD611 is easy to set up, operate, manage, maintain, and secure with field-installable media handling designs and wireless communication options. These compact printers are available in direct thermal transfer, healthcare. Hey, we talked a little bit about that today.
A little bit of healthcare, yeah.
Linerless and RFID models, which support virtually every 2-inch use case. To learn more and find helpful resources, specs, target industries, and use cases, visit the link in the show notes. The TEConnect Podcast is also brought to you by Elo. All right, self-service, never been easier.
Yes.
I mean, it should be easy.
Well, right.
We think it should be easy.
And it's made easier by people like Elo.
Yeah. You want to do this one for me?
No, I'm good. Yeah,
You're on it. Elo's Wallaby Pro kiosk stand in particular can make self-service much easier. The Wallaby Pro is changing the industry by making it easier than ever to configure interactive self-service solutions. Choose from wall, counter, and floor models, engineered with configurations to fit any space in retail, restaurants, hospitality, healthcare again, and corporate environments. Just add a 22, 24, or 27-inch touchscreen display. All right, if you're looking for more options, though,
even more
let's
options?
talk about a custom branded backer board.
Nice.
You want to lay a little marketing and branding to your
Who
kiosk.
doesn't want to do that? Yeah.
Ceiling pole to minimize footprint. One of those cords all over the floor. People tripping all over them.
Yeah.
And a printer.
Yes.
You can have an ADA compliant keyboard.
Okay.
An assist button.
Yep.
You can use Elo's Edge Connect to attach accessories.
Are you talking modularity right now, John?
Of course I'm talking modularity.
All right,
One of your favorite words.
Yes, I love it.
That's one that's not a 4-letter word to you. That's
no, especially with
what's
you.
the opposite of a 4-letter word?
I don't know. It's the good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Are the good words the 5-letter words? I don't know. Sleep, that's a 5-letter word.
No, see, that's a good word. Yeah.
I'm trying to. Okay. Yeah.
Anyway.
And the Wallaby Pro stand offers easy to access concealed housing for a power strip, power bricks, compute devices, cables, whatever you might need. So if you're ready to help your customers design the most customizable self-service solutions, start with the Wallaby Pro. Contact your Elo representative to learn more.